Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
Are you where you want to be as a speaker? Not only in your speaking skill set, but also if you're looking to make speaking a career. If not, take the advice of my mentor, Herron. He's quick to remind me that success is a choice, your choice. You can also take that advice from today's guest, Roddy. Jim says that we're in complete control of our career trajectory, and he's done the research to prove it. Jim has studied walk-ons, and if you're not familiar with the term, a walk-on is an athlete who wasn't recruited nor received a scholarship to play their sport in college. Yet these athletes do what it takes to achieve success. Jim is here to share how we, as ordinary people, can accomplish extraordinary feats when our energy is properly channeled. Here's my chat with Roddy. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the show.
Peter, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jim, you've written a couple of books, and the more recent one being The Walk-On Method to Career and Business Success. What's the core concept behind this book?
Thanks for asking. I'll share the core of the book, and it's also the core of the keynote presentation that I give that's based on the book. I don't just do a dramatic reading of the book, but it is a platform for what I'm doing. So the walk-on method features 31 underdog athletes. So a walk-on is a non-scholarship, right? Everybody else on the team, they pay them to go to school. This is somebody who doesn't, have the scholarship. And so we talked to these walk-ons and talked about how they use their college experience. So that involves scrambling to make the team, scrambling to stay on the team, then getting no playing time. Oftentimes they didn't even start off having a uniform, or if they did get one, it didn't fit, or they get no respect, no attention from the coaches, right? And they're really forced to serve others and focus on team goals. So we talked to them about how did they take that experience and that attitude and apply it to their professional career. And we found out that those folks were wildly successful. But the book goes beyond just, some interesting stories. And it really outlines how anybody can learn the walk-on attitude at any age. And if they follow the walk-on method and change their behavior, they can succeed in their career. We've seen it from, the book has appealed very much to high school, college students, right, who are looking to get started in the working world. Their parents are very interested. It's saying in terms of, yes, this is how it really works. Folks who are new to the workforce, it sees how can they propel their career, and even longtime employees, right, who want to get more out of their job and really, get up and move on. So like if there's a gist of the book, it's that ordinary people, even underdogs and maybe especially underdogs, but ordinary people will accomplish extraordinary feats when their energy is properly channeled. And so the way that these walk-ons behaved back then is now second nature to the way they behave today because they were forced back then to behave that way. And so you can see the book is it's an accessible book. It's not an academic book by any means.
Now, within the book, you have 5 steps for the walk-on method, correct?
I do. That's right. Yeah. Happy to walk through those. So step number 1 is take a big shot. Anybody can make a layup. So if anybody doesn't like the sports analogies, I apologize. There are a few of them in here, but I try to not go over the top with them. So take a big shot really gets down to don't sell yourself short when you're setting your next career-related goal. Don't say, this is what I really want to do, but then aim for something less just to play it safe. Again, anybody can do that. Anybody can make a layup. Take a big shot. Step number 2 is make a passion statement. That's passion with a P, not fashion with an F. So make a passion statement. And so it's prepare with passion, practice with passion, and then play with passion. And so what that really means is too many people just they wish that their dream is going to come true, or they say, you know what, when the moment presents itself, I'm going to give it my all. But we say, don't wish or don't want, walk on to your dream. Right. And so, of course, walk-ons play with passion. You see them get in a game, they're, flying all over the place in order to get it done. But what people don't see is the preparation they put into it and all the practice. So again, make a passion statement, prepare, practice, and play with passion. Step number 3 is run uphill. We say that takes longer and it makes you stronger. And it's all about embracing obstacles. And so we're often taught to avoid obstacles or seek the path of least resistance. And so where this kind of comes from is when I would run road races when I was younger and do cross country. And when people would be running up a hill, that's when everybody slows down. They'd see a hill, oh, I hate the hill, and they kind of trudge up the hill, right? But I determined, like, what if I sprinted up the hill? What if every time I saw something more difficult, I ran as fast as I could? Well, A, it helped me, catch up on the folks who were in front of me. But also, if you pass somebody going up a hill, it totally freaks them out because they're like, who is this psycho who's sprinting up a hill? And that's what we saw with a lot of these walk-ons. They lean into the difficulty of the situation and embrace the obstacles because they know on the other side of the experience, they're going to be battle tested. So again, that's, running uphill. When you see a hill, don't run away from it, sprint up it. And then the last two steps, first is step 4 is don't fuss. All must. And so the must is capital M, capital U, capital US, stands for maximize the unique strengths. So no fuss means control your emotions, especially the negative ones, as you're advancing through your career, right? If you get passed over for a promotion, instead of complaining about it, just shake your head for a moment in private and then resolve to work harder and get better. Again, the all must, it's about maximizing your unique strengths. Figure out what you do special, right? All the walk-ons that we profile, they were shorter, skinnier, slower than their more gifted scholarship teammates, but they figured out what they did differently. And then the last step number 5, is make them throw you out of the gym. So never, ever, ever, ever quit. So, what it means is a lot of times people will say, oh, I can't do that thing. They throw themselves out of the gym. I'm not going to try after the team because everybody's better than me. I'm not going to go after that job opportunity because I'm sure there are people smarter than me. Well, give it your best and make them throw you out. Keep going back and don't leave until you get what you came for. So those are the 5 steps of the walk-on method.
I love when we watch shows, say, of college football game, and they talk about that walk-on who earned a scholarship because they worked so hard and overcame adversity. I like it how you bring that to business and just the general attitude.
No, and again, that's what we saw when we interviewed all these folks. When I first started doing the interviews, I'm like, I'll talk to 5 or 10 and let's see what I find out. I'm like 10 into this. I'm like, wow, these folks have unbelievable stories, how this sparked them. Then I got to 20, then I got to 30. Then I'm like, I finally got to write this book when I did that. So yeah, it was unbelievable how I didn't have anybody who I talked to that it really, that, like you said, that attitude and that approach didn't lead them to incredible success as a professional.
Jim, you've been using public speaking to make your book come alive, if you will. How have you been doing this?
Yeah, well, so one, as I think anybody in the speaking world knows, it was really difficult to do during the pandemic, right? I launched this book in 2020, which is when it seems like every speaker was sidelined. But again, going back to embracing obstacles, like what are you going to do about that instead of, curling up into a ball? So what I was able to do is a lot of online workshops where I give a mini version of my keynote presentation, and then we break it down into having a dialogue with the folks who are on that call. And then we would also have worksheets that we'd be able to give to folks as well, and then kind of recap and reconnect from there. I've also done a ton of podcast interviews as well. And so happy to spread the gospel of the book in whatever format it is, whether it's on somebody's YouTube channel or, a well-known podcast that has lots and lots of listeners. Happy to spread the gospel that way. And then I will be speaking later at like a franchisee conference. They really like the message of the book. And so I'll be able to talk with them. And so you can see I kind of have the pitch down pretty well in terms of what the 5 steps are and how people can apply it. And things of that nature. And that's in part where I wrote the book, because I knew it would be something that was easy to translate and digestible, and anybody would be ready for this message. You mentioned my first book. It's called Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer, HIRE. It's about hiring best practices through the eyes of a cancer surviving executive, which is me. When I was 32, I was diagnosed with colon cancer, but now, thank goodness, I've been cancer-free for 20 years. But I realized writing that and trying to turn that into speaking, right? Not everybody's looking to hire. And even those who are looking to hire, some people just think they're God's gift to hiring. And so they're not going to listen to you anyway. And so it was too narrow of a group. And so the walk-on method really applies, and folks can understand, again, how their high school kid all the way up to somebody who's been in the workforce for 30, 40 years can apply these the messages and the method in the book.
You've been a public speaker at shows, conferences, and online for more than 15 years. What advice do you have for other speakers?
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to step 2 of the walk-on method, right? In terms of the make a passion statement, prepare, practice, and then play with passion. And so, for speaking in person, or preparing for a podcast or moderating for a panel, right? Any of those things that I do, whether it's virtual, in person, or just preparing for a meeting where I'm going to be speaking, I make sure that I prepare, right? Like, for this conversation that we're having today, I'm not like off the top of my head, I wonder what we should talk about, right? In fact, I made notes, I prepared, I walked through, I listened to, past episodes of the podcast, see how you ask questions, how the dialogue went, what the types of guests are, what the types of audiences. You need to be able to do that, right? It's a lot of times people just see a speaker and they're like, wow, they're a natural. Maybe there are some naturals, but I think most of them are not. And so again, I have notes, I rehearse, and then I will also record what I do, and I will tweak and make improvements to that as well. I also think, and this kind of ties in when I was in radio broadcasting for a while, where I would do college basketball games. And so I tried to find what books are there on those communication best practices. And I was surprised how there really wasn't much, if anything. I had to scramble and put it together. But the books that I've embraced from a speaking standpoint are Mastering Executive Presence is a good book. Do You Talk Funny by David Nihill. He talks about how stand-up comedians, they keep your attention for an hour and a half. How can we do that as speakers? And then there's also a book called Power Panels. And even though I've done all this stuff, like you said, for 20 years, I'm always looking to see what are the folks doing. And again, I integrate the preparation into everything that I do. And the one book that I did find on, from a radio broadcaster was Marv Albert. And it was, I think it was called something like, I'd love to, but I have a game. And somebody actually gave it to me when I was recuperating from cancer. So I've had the book now for 20 years. But I remember reading in there where he said he uses only 10% of the notes that he prepares for a game in the actual game. So you just think the mass amount of preparation that goes into it, and they integrates at the right time. So again, he's a great one. He's a Hall of Famer. You might think, well, he just, after X amount of years, he doesn't have to prepare anymore. Absolutely not. You see, the best speakers are the ones who are always preparing and practicing and tweaking and getting better at better.
Yeah, when you learn the behind the scenes of any speaking, but in this particular case of a Marv Albert, anybody like him, sports announcer, they're on site before we think they are. We think they just show up the day of the game or the night before. They're on site. They're doing interviews with players, coaches, referees. They're piling through their notes. And I can't remember if it was Marv Albert or someone else say that in their hotel room, they get 2 double beds, one to sleep in and one to lay all their notes across, and that they pour through those for the couple of days, if not longer, before the game.
I've never heard that story before, but I can say I always do prefer having 2 queen beds in a room, and I seek that because I do have the one bed where I put my head, and the other thing where I lay out the work and planning that I have for a conference that I'm doing. So interesting that you say that.
How do you see public speaking benefit you as your career goes on?
Interesting that you asked that question. So it's a concept that I've shared with other people, and I call it enhanced perceived competence. Okay, so we are all, 10 units competent, let's just say. But if you get up on stage and you're able to deliver effectively and you're able to do it in a memorable way, the perception of your competence goes up exponentially in that manner. It doesn't make you any more competent, right? But people perceive it that way. And that's part of from a book as well. And so if you get the book and the speaking together, I've given a lot of presentations on hiring, and have done workshops because I published Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer 10 years ago. I always say to people, I've had more people say, you know what you're talking about because you wrote the book on hiring than actually bought the book on hiring, right? So I call it enhanced perceived competence. So that's part of the reason why, I'm in a business where I work in the technology field, and it's all about, for marketing and things like that. And so the perception of my competence is hugely important. If I'm doing great behind 4 walls, that only goes so far. But if you're able to present at shows or breakouts or online or podcasts or things of that nature, people perceive you differently and they perceive you better. So I always encourage folks, like, the number one skill that you can develop as a professional, what you need to teach your kids as well, is in terms of make sure they're good at that. Because if they're up there stuttering and stammering and or just boring, it's not going to work out. And if anybody's in sales, you can't sell to anybody when they're asleep. And as a speaker, you can't convince anybody when they're asleep or stare at their phone. So you've got to make sure that you do things to keep their attention.
Warren Buffett agrees with you in that one of the greatest things you can do for your career is to learn to communicate more effectively.
100%. I'd say it's the number one thing you can do for your career. I mean, maybe if you're a computer programmer, it's just all about the programming, or maybe an engineer, it's not as important. But most other walks of life, it's P2P, not B2B. It's people working with people. And if you communicate well, again, enhanced perceived competence, it's going to go up and up and up.
I believe even for that coder, the better they can communicate, the more effectively they can communicate, the more likely they are to progress in their business, in their corporation as well.
100%. And the one thing that I've seen is I've studied, like I said, a lot of the best speakers. They're also very good writers, right? It's not just I've learned how to rehearse some script. They're very good at writing, and they're able to put that together and present it on stage or in whatever format it is.
I agree with you in that writing and speaking, if you can do either, you are considered an expert. Now, how well you do them determines whether people keep that perception or if it's enhanced or decreased. If you don't speak well, they'll go from, wow, this guy's got to be an expert to, oh, well, maybe not. And the same thing in writing. You put a book out that's not fluent, doesn't convey the message to the reader in a way they can comprehend and use it. Well, you were an expert. Now it's, I'll have to get someone else's book.
Absolutely, because of that perception, 100%. You think about it when you're presenting to somebody, whether it's on a big stage or whether it's in a small group, when you are done speaking, they're no longer going to be neutral in terms of how they view you. It's either going to be more positive or it's going to be in a more negative light. And so again, that's why you got to put in that preparation. You've got to make sure that you deliver something that's really solid. Yeah, no matter what your walk of life.
It's behind the scenes. We don't see what goes on behind the scenes with other people. We think it just happens. There's an awful lot of work. And keeping these sports analogies and metaphors, no athlete just walks onto the field or the court or the ice, whatever it might be, and just has it happen. They put hours and hours and hours. And as you can tell by the Yankees hat behind me, I'm a huge Yankees fan. Even though I'm here in Rhode Island in Red Sox country, incredible Yankees fan. And I always go back to, even though he's retired, Derek Jeter. Here's a man who played till he was 40 years old.
Yep.
He started playing organized baseball when he was 7 or 8 years old.
Yep.
What did he do every day that he wasn't playing? Took batting practice, took infield practice.
Yes.
They call it practicing. We call it rehearsing, but you don't accomplish great things without it.
Exactly. And actually, I'm in my book, I quote in the introduction, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who ties in with this. It says, "The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night." And so I'm not a big poetry guy by any means. Like if there was a class that I was falling asleep in college, it was poetry. But to me, that really speaks to me and speaks to what you're talking about, Peter.
That's a great passage. I've never heard that before. And as I heard it, it's like, wow, that just fits.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the folks that, I have somebody I work with in this industry. They said, you can sleep when you get to the old folks home, right? Like now is the time to really invest in yourself and to do that preparation, that rehearsal, that practice.
And I believe that's true at any age. Look at all the people who started when they were young, but look at all the people who started when they were in their 50s, 60s, even 70s or later and accomplished great things.
Yep, absolutely. Like the whole podcast, right? Like those did not exist. YouTube did not exist. So you've got to make sure you're staying up on not just the new media, but how the world works.
So what's next for you?
That's a good question. I guess I'm going to keep getting better at what I do, like keep doing the preparation, keep doing the studying. I draw inspiration from again, you can see on the shelf behind me, all sorts of books that I have as well. And one that really jumped out to me, it was The Big Show, Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick, because I wanted to see how could I get, from a better broadcaster, things like that. And they said kind of what you touched on. I remember the lesson was, if you want to write. If you want to broadcast. If you want to speak. And I alluded to earlier, for 9 years, I did basketball on the radio at my alma mater, Gannon University. That's where I walked on, a small Division II school in Erie, Pennsylvania. I was getting $25 a game, even for road games, right? And I'm in Pennsylvania. There's a league up in Michigan. So I would drive my own expense, pay for my own meals, my own gas, do a game. If it was a doubleheader, I'd get $50, right? It didn't cover, what it was. But now when I moderate, right, I'm able to pick up on cues of what's going on from a session, or when I'm speaking, be able to read the room and integrate the atmosphere, because I just got trained doing that. Like as a basketball announcer, you can't predict, much of anything. And so you really have to be able to react and do it. And so I'm going to make sure that I keep investing in those things and keep getting speaking opportunities, no matter how much they pay, if they pay at all, if they're one-on-one, if they're in a small group or whatever, because the more that you do, the better that you can get. A friend of mine, so before I got into this profession, I worked for a minor league basketball team here in Erie. It was while I was in college. I was actually playing basketball, going to school, and I was a public relations director for a minor league basketball team at age 21. Back at that age, I would never hire a 21-year-old to do that, but I had a great opportunity. But Tom McGinnis was for a year our play-by-play guy. And if folks are saying, why does that name sound familiar? For 25 years, he's been the voice of the Philadelphia 76ers. So people see all that success. What they don't see is all the minor league, work that he did. And then also, I remember him telling me a story. He would go to sporting events and take just a tape recorder with him and prepare like he was actually doing a game. He would get a spot, in the press box, or he was able to get one. And he would call the game like he was Brent Musburger. And he said just one level below him was Brent Musburger. And he would say, man, I'm so close, but I'm so far. But you see the work that guy put in, and that's how we got to be, voice of the Sixers again for a quarter century. So that's, I guess, what am I going to keep on doing? I'm going to keep preaching the walk-on method gospel in terms of whatever form comes across my way. Again, whether it's a big venue or whether it's in front of, dozens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, just going to keep on speaking and keep on learning and getting better.
It's the way to do it. As I tell my clients, the more you speak, the more you'll speak.
Exactly right. 100%.
Jim, it's been great having you here. Where can my listeners go to learn more about you and to contact you if they'd like?
Sure. If they want to buy the book, The Walk-On Method, both my books, Walk-On Method and How Your Leg Can Just Beat Cancer, are available on Amazon. So you can just search for those. If folks want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at jim@jimroddycba.com. So Jim at JIMROD, D as in dog, Y, CBA, that's the ABC's backwards. It stands for Coach and Business Advisor. .com. And if you mention this podcast, I'm happy to send you a free chapter from the Walk-On Method. And then my website is jimroddycba.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. And even if you're a stranger, I'm more than happy to share with you anything that I've learned, because so many folks have passed along their knowledge to me.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure my listeners will too. Jim, it's been a pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great talking to you, Peter.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites, public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.